Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Sabi Ahmed. I'm the Associate Director and Curator at the Ishara Art Foundation. We're beginning our third session of Alt+Shift+Studio's newest iteration titled Fractured Grids, and I'm delighted to welcome all of you. I believe a few more people are still joining, but I'm going to start with the introduction in any case. It gives me great pleasure to actually welcome you to the third session, because over the past two sessions, we've had various interesting articulations of studio practices situated in Kashmir and in the UAE, between Sharjah and Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and how practices really produce context as much as they are inhabiting contexts. So just to give you a brief introduction of Alt+Shift+Studio, and then I'll hand it over to Himanshu and the artist, Jasmine Nilani Joseph, today. Alt+Shift+Studio comprises of artist conversations and video tours that explore how contemporary artists redefine the idea of the artist studio in the 21st century. The artists in the series are those with whom we've had prolonged conversations and have worked with before at the foundation, and we're delighted to bring some of those conversations to you here. An impulse, if you followed the previous sessions behind this web series, was to take the pulse of contemporary art practice through the ways in which infrastructures meet ideas. One could argue that the idea of a studio has undergone a radical change from what it signified in some parts of the world after the middle of the 20th century. It was a space of isolation in which artists drew from their inspiration and produced artworks. There were these large enclosures. These often pictured as large spaces, oftentimes stacked with canvases and sculptures, and a solitary male figure that looms large. You can think of Jackson Pollock's studio, you can think of Mark Rothko or Francis Bacon's studio. What if we were to actually say that that was really a fantasy that is still perpetuated in art schools and in many parts of the world, and that modern contemporary artists in other parts of the world never really operated that way, even though they might have aspired to it? What if we were to say that an artist studio in Hong Kong has a unique relationship with the city, different from an artist studio in Lahore, Delhi, Shanghai, Hanoi, Jaffna? And what if we were to say that each artist's practice produces a different image of the city because of the sites that their processes demand? What other image of the artist studio can we carry with us? Another impulse of this series draws inspiration from an initiative that was conceived by Rux Media Collective titled City as Studio, as part of the Sarai program in Delhi between 2010 and 2013. City as Studio created context for high-intensity interdisciplinary processes at different locations in the city of Delhi. Sometimes these practices were rendered as an exhibition, at other times as a gathering, or sometimes as a library, as a temporary archive, or as an occasion for performances, conversations, and debates. At still other times, it took the form of a workshop, a temporary atelier, a media studio, a publication, or an online platform. Alt+Shift+Studio is a series of dialogues that takes place almost a decade after City Studio was first begun. Many shifts have occurred in the field since then, and I hope that you'll find through the different presentations that we're hosting this year the changing contours of contemporary art practice. The studio's interface, the studio as a space of gatherings, the portable studio that moves with each residency program that artists go on, and several more sites and improvisations inform this discussion on the studio. The artist we have with us today is based in Jaffna, which is in the north of Sri Lanka. It has had a very difficult history over the past 3 or 4 decades. Anyone aware of the history of South Asia is also aware of the civil war that was going on for practically 3 decades in Sri Lanka. And Jaffna was one of those cities that was most severely affected. It's also the place where one of the largest libraries in Asia once resided, and because of the civil war, it was burned down in the 1980s. Jasmine is an artist who was based there. a lot of our practice is informed by the landscape, the residues of all of these kinds of difficult histories, and not just histories of conflict, but also climate change and the kind of natural calamities that are increasingly being witnessed and experienced in the world. One of them being the tsunami that had hit and had severely affected large parts of that area. So when in conversation with Jasmine, we were well aware that the relationship of an artist with their studio is not merely one of a space of quiet and solitude, but rather a place where the outside and inside are very porous, that there's a lot of outside that gets present inside, and the relationship between domestic spaces, public spaces, the city, and a practicing space are often blurred. So we're going to hear some of that today, but I'm going to hand it over to Himanshu to give an introduction of this year's edition of Alt+Shift+Studio, and also introduce Jasmine. The session is being recorded, and we'll be taking questions by the end of the session. So the layout, as some of you would have experienced in the past sessions, is that after Himanshu's introduction and Jasmine's few words, we're going to play actually a video clipping along with audios that Jasmine has prepared to kind of give a sense of the studio and the various spatial inhabitation that her practice takes. After the video, we'll be opening a conversation between Himanshu and Jasmine, and this will be followed by an open Q&A with all of you who are present. The recording of this session is also going to go online. We've experienced in the past recordings and sessions of Alt+Shift+Studio that there's quite a nice afterlife of this series, in which people who are doing research on these artists end up looking at these videos later on. So we hope you enjoyed today's session. We hope you will participate in the discussion, and we hope you'll also spread the word. Himanshu, over to you.
Thank you, Sabi. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Sabi, for this such a detailed and comprehensive introduction to Alt+Studio, and for continuing the conversation about studios and networks of sites. Many of our internal discussion at Ishara led us to think about a grid-like structure, and in our surroundings are kind of both porous and fragile in the same time. I think you kind of briefly mentioned that in the introduction, but so that was really important to kind of create a link of when we speak about artist studios. For me, Alt+Studio kind of reimagines the contemporary practices that navigates between the media and the data. It also defines the network of production, consumption, and a platform that can respond to the shift that is taking place around us. As a part of 2023 edition, Alt+Studio interrogates some of these questions to the theme of fractured grids. We came up with this idea because when I was studying archaeology, one of the methods that was used for excavation was box grids. And it is a technique that leaves a section of a site undisturbed, and yet allows us to see the deposits that are beneath the layers. Thinking about this, almost like using the same box grid approach to the artistic practices of the 21st century, we can peek into the concepts of production, collaboration, friendship, and solidarities as almost like leaving that residue. The notion of grid, in a sense, also implies the endlessness, but also rigidity and structure to it. Grids try to rationalize, the control, they exercise power, they expand, they discipline, and they colonize. But in spite of their open-ending nature, fracture grids explores how artists' practices are shaped both inside and the outside of the studio spaces in a manner that offers multiple paths for navigation. The new edition moves to the cities that include Jaffna, Karachi, Kashmir, Dubai, Sharjah, Abu Dhabi, offering insights into how ecology, civil movements, war, migration, not only shape contemporary art practices, but also offer nuanced ways to think about spaces where the art actually happens. As we were discussing fractured grids within the team, we kind of looked at practices, we kind of tried to sort out practices that would shift the narrative in the local context, and thereby also leaving a kind of a residue for a ripple effect in the future. The key aspect when we were thinking about Jasmine's practice was to, in a way, she was dealing with the changing environment, not just in terms of ecology, but also civil war and displacement that was taking place when she was as she was growing up around the area. Place, identity, and memory become some of her key markers in a practice. She's also one of the young practitioners based from Jaffna, and I would like to make a brief introduction to her before we actually begin the presentation by her. Jasmine Nilani Joseph was born in Jaffna, Sri Lanka, where she's currently based. She completed a Bachelor of Fine Arts at the University of Jaffna. Her solo exhibition, The Sixth Diary, was recently held at the Vadera Art Gallery in Delhi. She has participated in several curated group exhibitions that include Gropius Pau in Berlin, Serendipity Arts Festival in Goa, Dhaka Art Summit, Colombo Scope Art Festival in Colombo, the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art in Sri Lanka in Colombo. She was an artist in residence at the Pepper House in Kochi, organized by the Kochi Biennale Foundation in 2020, and participating artist in the 10th Asia Pacific Triennale in Brisbane. Jasmine's work has been published in international journals, magazines. Her practice has been featured in Biden's Vitamin D3 Today's Best in Contemporary Drawing. She was recipient of the DBA Asia Art Future Award by the Asia Society Game Changer Award, India in 2022. Now I would like to invite Jasmine to make a presentation.
I think Jasmine's connection is being, she's trying to change her internet connection. And actually, this is something that all of us in preparation for Alt+Shift+Studio were discussing, that it's interesting as we have invited certain artists who are in places where internet connectivity is unstable. It's probably important to register the fact that, yes, there are studios out there are artists practicing out there with low bandwidth. And that too informs the practice, and that too should basically inform the idea of how the global studio is operating. It's not all high bandwidth, it's not all air conditioned, it's not all landlocked. Sometimes they're coastal, sometimes they're in the middle of bustling traffic, sometimes they're in the middle of even complete isolation. So Jasmine, whenever you're ready, you can switch on your video and we can have you come on board. While Jasmine logs into her, I think, a different connection, Himanshu, do you want to share a little bit about how Fractured Grids was being conceived for the different cities that you chose?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when we were doing internet discussion within the team, there was a lot of emphasis on look at spaces that actually suffers this multiple fractures. And I think these fractures, when we put it in the context of the way studio operates, it operates at different levels of bandwidth, like the way we're interfacing right now. And I remember the first session when we had several discussions with Zainab. One of her key concerns was to actually see whether it can operate whether the internet bandwidth will happen, because I think Kashmir is one of the regions where there is the highest number of blackout for internet.
Correct.
So I think we were basically looking at spaces that has these like complex geographies, but at the same time, contemporary history, they kind of allow shifts to happen. And we wanted to bring practices that kind of anchored in these practices that are also exposed in a sense to the situations where this romantic notion of a studio, which felt as if like the artist is beautifully sitting in a studio and painting. I think we wanted to break away from that notion. So when we thought about cities, there was a lot of emphasis on Kashmir. There was an emphasis on the next session that is with Omer Wasim in Karachi, where he's working under very different circumstances, which we will come back in the next session. With Jasmine, it was to focus on how we are dealing with these complex landscape histories, which there's a constant erasure of people's memories and histories, and the way we were trying to look at how artists are not just chroniclers of the present time, but they're also readers of also makers of history. Because earlier the concept of history was it's always been written in books, and it's about the empires and the kings and the queens. But I think today's markers are about the stories of the common people. That's where I think these platforms, whether we are talking about ChatGPT or we are talking about metaverse, there's a lot of discussions around how we are looking at practices that are now responding to these radical shifts that are taking place. And I'm also like one of the key factors that came out of discussion was one of the books that I was highly inspired by, not just a book but a talk, which was by formerly Beatrice Preciado to now Paul Preciado, and where she talks about 15th and the 17th century are the markers of the change that was taking place around the world. And now the era that we occupy is that radical shift that is taking place in history. So I think we are witnessing that change that is happening. That's why we wanted to kind of mark these art practices that allows us to look at these histories from as an observer.
Yeah. Correct. No, thank you. That's a very detailed and in-depth response to, I think, something that will really give more insight into even the session with Jasmine. Jasmine, how's it going? Are you able to hear us? I can see her online.
Yep.
Well, you know, if I may add, over the past years, I've been following Jasmine's work, and it's been a fascinating journey to discover, because I had a chance to teach briefly upon the invitation of friends in the Jaffna University some art history courses, and you can see that there was a very palpable experience that a lot of the students had of the civil war that was going on, and by 2009, of course, was officially marked as an end to. But when you're this up close to such difficult histories and conflicts, how does one write about any of this from a place that is both historical but also personal? And I think when looking at Jasmine's work, you can see that the pen and the paper, the nib, the inscription, the act of mark making, all of these really end up going into attempts at actually telling the story, attempts at capturing the landscape, as you said. And that landscape is really one that is also the cityscape. So, you know, one easily tends to separate the landscape from the city, as if landscape is nature and the city is urban, it's constructed. Whereas in her practice, you can really see the blurring of the lines between landscape and city, because so much of the city has been razed, has been completely demolished in many cases. And so you end up having a very different idea of the skyline. A lot of cities are remembered for their skyline, for high-rise buildings. You know, you have the cliched image of the skyline, which is seen from a distance. A famous skyline is Chicago. Another famous one is New York. They're usually coastal also. Dubai's skyline is famous with the Burj Khalifa standing tall. And when you see Jasmine's practice, you actually see a skyline, a panoramic view, but with a very different topography, very different geometries at work. I believe now Jasmine is with us, and she has been able to log in. Jasmine, are you there? Do you want to start?
Yeah, hi, perfect. I'm here. I'm just connecting through my mobile actually, and I just tried to connect the video with, through the PC, but I think that I am, yeah. So can I just ask Himanshu to play the video first?
Sure.
And before that, I just wanted to thank Isharat Foundation to give this kind of chance to talk about my practice and the issues with the studio, Alt+Shift, and all these kind of programs in this edition. So I think it will be nice to play the video along with the audio, and then I can just rejoin with you. Yeah.
Sure. So Jasmine, as I play the video, would you like us to play the voiceover of yours also with it? Or
Yes,
you
yes.
will tell us when
As
to
we
play the
discussed.
voiceover?
Yeah, sure.
You will tell. Okay. I'll play the
Yeah.
video, and then when the video pauses, then I will play the audio.
Yeah. So yeah, if in the middle, if my PC is connected, I can just take everything over.
All right. No problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just play the video. Yes.
Okay.
I divide my travels into 3 parts, and I am really interested in talking about it with the footages which I use as source for my works. The first and major role of my travel is displacement from 1990 to 1995. And when I started my career as an artist, I drew from the memory and the experience which I had in 2015, in which I got a chance to visit my ancestors' land, which was a high security zone for around 3 decades, turned my focus onto the side of fences and the landscapes. Since then, I keep working around the idea of fence and draw from the childhood memories. Here, I identified the mind became a storage of works and the space where the production happens, and I can call it as the studio. And then, traveling became a major role of my career when I decided to work based in Jaffna. Even though Jaffna was the place where I born, I feel an outsider. It's because I am homeless. And to get the feeling of home, I used to travel to Vaunia to spend time with my parents. During the travels, I used to travel by bus and train. And when I look out through the window, the moving landscapes thrill me and give a kind of nostalgia. Also connect me back with memories of displacement. I often look at the same locations again and again and capture them as video files, and when I create the drawings, the impact of those landscapes reflects on my works. These are not about copying the entire landscape, but like I feel some elements which support to lead and narrate the works. The sound of the train, the crowd of people, and the scenery made me think about the conflicts and the history of the recent past. They especially remind the news telecast of 2000s. The songs which are played by the drivers of the government buses are different according to the places: Colombo, Vaunia, Jaffna. I would say the songs let you guess the location where you are traveling at that moment. Getting a seat close to the window is a special gift in a crowd. Most of the thoughts and new ideas come during the travels. Here, all these kind of vehicles I travel by became my own studio space, and it's absolutely a moving studio. The multiple perspectives give many ideas of composition and rhythm of my works. Being an artist in a country which has the scars of war is really challenging for an emerging artist, and it would become more challenging when we affect with pandemic and economical crisis. The lockdowns and isolation during the pandemic threw me out of my old studio and locked within a limited space at my home. It took a very long time to find out and set up a new studio space in Jaffna. While the flood hit in December 2020, in the temporary space which I was staying, I supposed to search a new space and finally found an unused kitchen and turned it a fascinating studio. It is interesting to say how the space of cooking became a space for an art production, and the chimney became the kind of canal to communicate with the landlord lady. I mean, she calls through the chimney when the food is ready. The third kind of travel is totally research based, and sometimes it became the part of my personal travels. Since 2015, I keep visiting to the release land, which was research based, and the third kind of travel is totally research based, and sometimes it became the part of my personal travels. Since 2015, I keep visiting to the release land, which was occupied by military more than 3 decades. I visited with my colleagues, siblings, and with my family to look out our land. The empty land with demolished houses and abandoned church and the forest like bougainvillea trees inspired me to create a huge work which was displayed at the 10th Asia Pacific Triennial. The aerial views of the land and the buildings I saw when I fly help me to play with perspective and composition in this series. Through the art history, when I study about artists through Renaissance to modern art, there were many kinds of norms of structuring art studios with lighting, materials, and methods. When I add those things into my practice, I have the question, do I maintaining the same or not? How can I think about light during the time of power cut? I must choose to work with mobile torch and candlelight. In my point of view, I think in contemporary art, the living space of artists on a moment becomes the studio space and it keeps shifting and moving every day. And the artists breaking the norms of the traditional ethics of the studio. I divide my travels into 3 parts, and I am really interested in talking about it with the footages which I use as source for my works. The first and major role of my travel is displacement from 1990 to 1995. And when I started my career as an artist, I drew from the memory. and the experience which
I think that marks the end of the first recording. Jasmine, did you have anything more to add to this?
can you hear me?
Yes.
Now I just play and I will share my screen now.
All right.
Okay. These are the footages of the places where I just walk and do some kind of research for my artworks. So the works you can see here is the Asia Pacific Triennials research. I did this research for that. And also me and my family members, we visit to the land, the ancestors' land, which is the released land, and this occupied for many years by the military. So you can see, now you can see the entire video again, so you can guess the idea of that. So the first clip is the three-wheeler. I just take my landlord lady, and with her I went to the place. And this here you can see the church, the released church of my grandparents. And from here I got the idea to work with this kind of the developing church and the bougainvillea trees, flowers, because after many years the land was kind of a forest-like place because of bougainvillea trees. So I just add them to my works as well. Yeah. Yes.
Wonderful. Shall we stop the screen share and we can all log in now?
Yeah, I have stopped.
Yes. You want to switch your video on also, Jasmine?
Yes, actually, I can. Can you see me?
Hi, Jasmine. Yes, we can see you and hear you as well. Very well. Thank you for allowing us to peek into really complex understanding of where you operate and where you actually operate from, because for us to actually get this sense, also allowing us to peek into your domain, because I think this is what actually shapes the practices. And I think for us, this is great way to understand how an artist operates within the spectrum of different practices. We have series of there were several questions that actually that came up, but I think I'm just, because of the time limitations, let's just stick to few. But I would like to start with very one question that has kind of kept coming back and forth while we were having conversation, and as well as when we were discussing with Sabi and Asavari within the team. Your everyday encounters in Jaffna are marked by fragile borders between the personal and the community and the state, because there are these multiple factors that kind of defines your everyday thing, right? So can you tell us more about how do you navigate across these identities and spaces? Because a lot of time access also becomes problematic. So, how do you actually deal with that sort of everyday problems?
Yeah, so actually most of the things come from my own experiences. Since my childhood, I was able to manage many things, like these kind of if I have any kind of problems in the delay of traveling or delay of getting materials or anything, I just as an artist now I everyday life I have to face some kind of problems of getting materials and traveling and everything. So actually the experience I had since 1995 to 2000, those times, I always just connect those memories, like how I managed as a little child, how me and my family members manage. So I just take some kind of influence and inspiration from my old memories, and then just try to force me to move on and that's why I keep just saying, like, I didn't give up on those days, and I have to still be very, very strong, that any situation can come, but I never stop my dreams and my hard work. So that is the only word I say to myself. Yeah.
No, thank you for that. And also in your, like you kind of, when we were looking at the video, you kind of constantly shifting the number of perspectives in the way we are looking at when we're looking at your practice and the way you kind of conceive things. So can you tell us about, like, how does it kind of reflect in your practice, and what actually prompts you to use this approach? Because it's kind of allowing us to see the multitude of approaches that kind of defining this. So how does the studio also allow you to facilitate the different aspects into putting it on the paper, or how did the transition happen?
The thing is, like, as an artist, I always believe that if I need to narrate some kind of ideas or my stories and the story of society, I have to mingle with them. So that's why I mostly choose the public transport. So you might see in the videos, like, I travel by train, bus, three-wheeler. So through that, I was able to mingle with the local people. So, like, for an example, I have to say, one day I was traveling in a bus, and next to me there was very old lady, and she was talking another lady, and she was just talking about the fence, the issue of the fence, like building a fence between her and her neighbor. And she was very shoutly, like, very in a very high volume, like she was saying that I just fight with this neighbor because she is trying to take my land from my side. So I just want to apply for the court to discuss about these kind of things. So, like, everyday life give me some kind of new informations, and also, like, when I hear these kind of when I listen these kind of stories, these kind of talks, the people talking, I just get inspired by them, and I also just connect those stories with my personal. And like, for example, in our family, like, my relatives also have these kind of issues about fighting for the their own fence between two lands. So I think that so the everyday process is mean, like, every time when I go out and travel in a bus or travel in a train, I think that I am getting information every day. I've been updated, and also, like, I just share these kind of experience with my friends. So I think, like, every day I don't draw something new. I know I don't draw every day, but I think that I just think every day. So, like, so that's how that the transport, the vehicle became a kind of studio space, because the space is not only about creating the physical works, that also about creating your ideas. So yeah, so that's why I mostly interested to take these kind of the views, multiple views, how I sit and look the driver and the conductor, what are they talking, what are the people talking next to my seat, and all these kind of things.
Oh, thank you for that. And also, I mean, like, fences is where most of everybody's fighting for the space, right? Like, the whole world is fighting for borders and fences. So I think, it's starting from, like, immediate to the absolute at global level. So I think it has, like, like, that's why when I introduce your practice, I also spoke about ripple effect, which speaks about how a small thing can actually affect much larger politics around the world. The question, like, third question, kind of again, in a sense, repeating, but slightly diverting from what you have just spoken about. In your drawing, you kind of, like, there is a miniaturist details about trees, lakes, shattered facades, or houses, fences, railway tracks. There's so much, like, so this kind of reminds me of a very socio-political, cultural shift, almost looking through a microscope, as if we are looking at how the whole thing operates. But from what you observe in your artworks, And how does this ideas, become, like you spoke about the ideas, but like how does ideas transit and becomes a work of art? Like how that transition happens in the studio?
Yeah. So as I said in the video, like when I look at the landscape, I just choose some kind of elements which really connected to my personal memories and personal thoughts. So for example, like if I look a very large landscape, I just take out the huts and the railway tracks and all. So they like really very close to my own experiences and very close to my concept and my narratives. Then I just study the structure of the image. For example, like if I look these kind of railway tracks and some kind of homes or buildings, then I look at different kind of homes and I choose one for my works. And I really wanted that kind of texture, so to play with. So like if I draw a very normal or simple building, that won't make any sense when you draw. So like as an artist, when I draw, I have to play with the texture, and so in some place I have to do some kind of stippling dots, and I have to do some kind of cross sketching, and sometimes I have to draw the entire leaves of the palmera and the coconut leaves fence. So I really like to play with that kind of details and that kind of miniatures. And also like when I draw with these kind of works, with these very minute drawings, I also I feel that it heals me, and it's a kind of meditation for me. When I draw the line, I also like my mind also go with those kind of lines. So it's a kind of I can say it's a kind of play. It's a kind of play with pen and ink, with the paper. So I really interesting to do these kind of details. For example, like if I draw a kind of a barbed wire, or if I draw a kind of a fence, I just have some kind of questions. Okay, what's the material, and how can I give the kind of sense of the texture of the palmera leaves fence, and how. So sometimes I fail, but I just do some kind of extra sketches for that, and then I finally apply. And also like it is I still remember one time my brother told me it is very easy to for a doctor to do a mark or cut the skin of a patient, but it's really it's really hard to draw a drawing in a pure white paper. So he really wanted, because as when I was a little kid, I have to draw some kind of drawings for school works and all. So when I start the first image, or when I start the first line, he really feels nervous, like how you have to be very careful, because what will you do if sometimes if some mistake would happen, we can't go again, and we have to go again and buy a new paper. So I also connect these kind of, so what people are saying about these kind of works. Like if I also, like many people, sometimes people have asked me, like, are they the real drawings, or sometimes are they like kind of photocopies, or some kind of machines like printed images like that. So I really like to play with these kind of mediums and all. So I think that final output come through these kind of journey actually.
This is great. Taking away from the two things that you mentioned, one was the interplay, and the second thing was material. Now, the next question kind of deals with that. I remember during one of our previous conversation, you told us a brief story about the courier boy who became really interested into who kind of delivers the paper supplies from Colombo to Jaffna. And could you please kind of share the story so that everybody kind of be aware, and how, like, is this like, how does it become so significant that it kind of becomes a common thread of between people and your practice, that kind of bridges together. So do you want to quickly tell us about it?
So like as you say, like in the beginning, when the Korean people they come, they don't have any kind of idea about the works and the papers, and like when they come to collect the artworks, they think that I send some kind of very heavy thing or something. and they like just asking, okay, what about the weight? And I say like 1,000 like 1 kilo, or sometimes 900 grams, like that. And then okay, if the work is like the parcel is 900 grams, then the amount is little high. So what is the amount for? Like these kind of questions they ask. And then I say like they are not simple like normal paper, they are artwork, and I'm just sending them to the gallery and the exhibition. I have to send them before the date of the opening of the exhibition. And then when in the beginning it was really hard to manage these kind of things, but nowadays they also start to understand the process. They know like, okay, they have to come and they have to collect the work, and they have to send the work very fast to German or India for the exhibition opening. So recently I had a very good experience. Like actually I had very limited time, and they worked for me on a holiday, and they just came here and collect the work, and they all together supported me to send the work to German last time. So I think like little by little I just started to let others to understand about this field and as an artist. So like they also ask many questions: where did you study, how did you become an artist, and what are the subject we have to take if any kind of people interested to do the same like you. So now people just ask some kind of questions, and I think it's a little bit of change from the early time. And I think I can just a simple spot to make a different a little change of this society as a mark. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a limited time, and just before we open it to everyone, just have a last kind of a question for you. You also mentioned about during one of our previous conversation, and this is a very peculiar thing that you mentioned. It kind of stuck in my head. You said that history is usually recorded through written text, and they're usually about about the empires than about common people. So and the human experiences. So having grown up in a region where abandoned spaces and emptiness was apparent to you on an everyday basis, and you were automatically drawn to them, what purpose or repurpose of these spaces, and are they part of the studio, or they're just memories? Like how does this apparatus of everyday observation that is around you, like how does it kind of navigate? Like I'm just kind of curious on those.
Can you just repeat the question, please?
Yeah, so in one of our previous conversation, you categorically mentioned that histories are recorded through writing, and they're usually about the empires, but not about the common human experiences. And you kind of grew up in the area where you observe a lot of abandoned spaces and emptiness around you, and you were automatically drawn to them. So then, like what purpose of these spaces serve to you? And then like, are they part of the studio, or they're just kind of memories that you kind of dwell upon? Like, this boundary line, like how does that work?
Yeah, so I have to say like they are part of the studio, and also they are part of my memories. Like it's a kind of take and give things. Like one side I keep those kind of memories from my childhood, and the other side, as an artist, I have to work with kind of limited space, and I have to do these kind of as developing my career, I have to do something. So when both come in one point, I think the works come out. So like we can't divide one to another. Like as I say, like normally we have some kind of histories about public space or kind of famous building, those kind of things, but we don't have a kind of personal history of local people or a local person. So as an artist, I just try to do some kind of things, like let others know, like a single person can become a kind of witness of a society. And like when every single person's stories and personal histories come out, it will come out a kind of a story of a society. So it's not only me, there are some other artists also doing these kind of things. So like nowadays I can see like there's a kind of like there's a kind of view about the artist who works in the north, like they like many artists has identified from these kind of background. And I think they are also spreading these kind of experiences and the social kind of history. So I think and the space just like personally my stories about the issues of the studios and the struggles of getting a space and all these kind of things became a kind of witness along with the history and the everyday issues, and all these kind of things also come up a kind of like a part of this travel. So I think both are like both are very important. And like when I take them like both of things together, it become a kind of milestone, I think, in my career.
Thank you. Sabi, do we have any public questions? Because we have a very limited time. We have already crossed.
Yeah, I don't see any Q&A from the audience. And I had one question though, which is that Jasmine, actually it's a two-part question. One, from your presentation, we gathered your relationship with so many people that surround your travels, that surround where you live, that surround where you practice, all of these things. What about your interaction with the artistic community? When and how frequently are you meeting other artists, art historians, curators, teachers, students, all of these people? That's one part. And the second part is that we're seeing a very mobile kind of practice where you're always on buses and trains, sometimes on flights. So your studio also then is actually on the move. But what about your exhibitions? So have you tried thinking about exhibitions also on the move, or do exhibitions become a stop, like a bus stop? So have you tried experimenting with not only the studio on the move, but also the exhibition on the move in some way? So the first part about your relationship with the artist community, and the second part about exhibitions on the move.
So the answer for the first question is like since the when in the time of my art education, when I study in the university, we normally it was our pleasure to get the space like a space by Asia Art Society. Like there's a kind of space, Sri Lankan Archive for Contemporary Art, Architecture and Design. So where that was the main place, and a place to connect the art students and artists and curators in one place. And I have to say, like there, like the space have a kind of library, and I visit often to read books there. And from there, all the dreams just started to grow up, because when I look at the Asia Pacific Triennial Catalog and Serendipity Art like festivals, or the Kochi Biennale catalogs. So through those kind of books, I just started to build my own wishes. Like I have to take part in these kind of things, and I have to go, at least I have to visit to the places to see what is really happen, to see them, the art festivals and all. So so in that actually in that space, the connection with with the other curators and writers and the other artists just started. And now like it's almost around 9 to 10 years we have grown up with that space. And nowadays, like we also like mingle with the do some kind of art with my colleagues, with my friends, the other artists. We join together and we do some kind of workshop for our kids. So like we just try to introduce the space to the next generation, and also we just try to take part to grow the space, and do some kind of art activities. And like sometimes when we have time, we just call to others, and we just plan to do a kind of workshops, and we go there, and the parents also come there, and the kids come. And some like we also like nowadays also we have some kind of talks, so we see our seniors and the other artists. They also just come from Colombo and other places. So yeah, so actually and in the university, I normally visit to the university. The university is very close to me, and they have some kind of art circles, and they call it as art circle, and they have some kind of artist talks and the other kind of art things. And also they have some kind of theater festivals and international cinema festivals. So I actually like to visit all these places. And also I travel to Colombo to meet my friends and visit to the MMCA, the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art, and Columbus Core people. So I keep in active to do these kind of things, except my artworks. And the second question is about like you have asked about what? I just forgot.
About thinking about exhibitions on the move. Have you tried that?
Yeah.
Because
So,
if your studio is on the move.
So like as an artist, like normally I don't rush with many works. I like whenever I get some kind of sparks to create works, then I work. And when that and also like I have to say that I sometimes I am lucky. Sometimes the curators and the art festivals, they directly connect me and ask me, if you are interested, can you work with us for this exhibition and all. So if I really like the background of the festival or the background of the gallery, and and I also like ask some questions about what kind of exhibition is this and what kind of thing I have to do. So like if I feel comfortable with them, if I feel that okay, my work is connect with this kind of idea, then I say no. And sometimes I have to, sometimes I said no, because sometimes I feel that okay, I'm not connected that much with this kind of concept or with these kind of things. So I say like no, I am not the kind of person, I can't do these kind of works. And luckily most of the works which I did, like for example the Asia Pacific Triennial works, it was really connected with me and actually connected with the ideas of my own works. And they really wanted the works what I really producing at that time. So that was very easy to me to work with them. So that's a kind of example I have to say. And also like some I also display my works some art galleries, and recently I exhibit at Vadera Art Gallery. That's the first international solo. So actually I did my first solo in Jaffna in 2019, and then it took around 4 years to do the first international solo. So you can check out the timing. So I don't run behind many things, like so when I feel that I have to do something, so if I feel some kind of interesting thing, I do. And also I'm really waiting to do some kind of artist residencies and all. So I always think that everything what I do, what I work with people, like if I work in this exhibition, the exhibition have to let me to move to another thing, not to stop
But
me. So,
I think you're maybe the way I framed the question, maybe it sounded like when I say exhibition, it automatically means gallery. I'm basically saying, what about thinking about showing works that do not need a gallery sometimes, that are site specific, that are in places which are not actually exhibition spaces, because even your studio space is not the conventional studio. If the studio is a bus, then even the gallery can be a bus stop.
Yeah, maybe.
So is that something you have thought about?
So I think that I see my studio space, and I see my travels and all these kind of things. let me to move on, and sometimes I need to take a stop, and in that place the galleries become a stop to stay and then restart my travel again. Yes.
Well, nothing from the audience this time. So I think it's been, anyways, it's a long session. We've had more than 1 hour today.
Sabir, there is a question.
There is? Okay. Let me see. Okay, there's an anonymous attendee, and I'm going to read the question out. Unfortunately, this might be the last question we'll take in case there's any other. Maybe we can have it as a separate forum or on email exchange. So I'll read this out, and this will be the last question. It's a two-part question. One, you spoke about the songs played in government buses that changed according to the locale. How different is it? Can you elaborate on it?
Yeah, so the songs like we have two kind of languages in Sri Lanka. So if I take the bus from Colombo to Jaffna, the first part until we reach Anuradhapura and Vaunia, like the songs most like the kind of Sinhala pop kind of songs and Hindi songs they play. So it's a very sound and all that kind of pop or kind of modern songs we listen, and we normally talk about those kind of songs, and the sound is very heavy, and sometimes we feel like okay, we feel like kind of headache and all. And then when we passed through Vaunia to Jaffna, there are kind of kind of melody and Tamil love songs and evergreen songs of 90s. So like when we close the eyes through the songs, we can guess, okay, now we are reaching Anuradhapuram, oh, now we are just reaching Vaunia. So the songs, the selection of songs is about the area where the bus is going on. Yeah, and that's very very open thing in Sri Lanka. Normally the people who travel in government buses, they know the everyday things. Yeah.
And the second question from the same person was, there's a lack of color, like a drought work, more like envisioning or developing a landscape. So any thoughts behind this lack of color?
Yeah, so like most of my drawings are in black are black lines, and I work in black and white, and I just started to work on gray, brown, and black, and all these kind of things. So actually I see that I heard many people normally when we talk about kind of dreams, we discuss like dreams. In dreams we just see the scene, we don't think about the colors. We normally talk about some kind of scenes in the scene in the dreams, and sometimes when we ask about the colors, okay, what kind of color I see in this that kind of dreams and all. And like dreams, the memories also, like when we talk about the memories or when we talk about the past, we it's a kind of negative image of original. So there's a kind of connection between the color of gray, brown, and black. They are the colors for me, they are the colors of memory. So that's why I really connect with that kind of dull colors. And I don't say like I won't make any kind of colorful works. I say I think that when I work on these kind of memory things, I supposed to use these kind of gray kind of black kind of colors. And if sometimes if I need any things, for example, if I have to talk about bougainvilleas, I have to take the colors of the pink color of bougainvillea, because actually when we talk about bougainvilleas, the colors are very important. So if I need them in the current situation, I can choose a pink in my work. So it's all about the works what I create and what kind of stories I have to connect. The stories and the content decide the colors.
Thank you, Jasmine. This was, well, the person asking the question just said thank you. And thank you everyone for attending. It was an extra long session, so thanks for your patience. And thank you, Jasmine, for putting all of this together in this beautiful presentation. We're going to have the recording up soon, and I think we can do quite a bit of editing in the recording so that it comes together in a more cohesive manner. But we could really get a sense of the context within which you're working, where internet connections can be unstable, and that's the live studio visit in a sense. But thank you for making those montages as well, and I think that was quite an insightful way of seeing your images with the world that you're kind of moving around in and depicting on your works. So this is our third session of Alt+Shift+Studio. Our last and final session, the fourth one, is going to be with Umer Wasim, who is based in Karachi, and that's going to be on the 21st of July. Jasmine is accessible on email. You can write to us if you'd like to be in touch with her. So thank you again, Jasmine, and thank you, Himanshu. Himanshu, do you want to add anything before we close today's session?
No, I think this is fine. Yeah.
So on that note, just to add a few more thank yous, a thank you to the team members who have also contributed to this, some of whom are backstage. There's Sabri Saigal, Manita Shetty. There's also Nikhil, who's been helping us edit videos and sound, and a thank you to him. So thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you in the next session.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.